agenda. So yes, I should probably let you know that in advance, Ram. So we've got a couple of topics on the agenda for today. So there's an update on the charters for working groups and where are we going with the CF for Kate's SIG call and a slot for any other business. So if we make a start with an update on the charters for working groups, and who'd like to update on that one?
I usually am failing at this, so I'm going to go first. Ruben and I have been making some significant progress on the foundational infrastructure working group. Sounds like Ruben talked to Ben a little bit about being an approver on it, which I'm really excited about. And we've got a list of about like 7 or 8 initial approvers, some text around a mission and vision. So I'm going to be bringing this to you all probably next time, because I didn't quite finish the text that I want to hopefully finalize it. I also have a lead candidate, yay, for the services working group, which I'm really excited about. No one else seems to be super interested in that area, so I'm really excited that we have somebody who's working on Cloud Service Broker who wants to do some part-time leadership there. And yeah, so I think she and I will make significant progress on the services one, but it might be a week or two. Foundational infrastructure will be there next week for you all.
Cool.
I can go ahead too. I just yesterday turned the App Runtime Platform draft charter into a real PR. I think I tagged everyone else on the TOC for review. So we can leave that open for review over the next week, see what we discuss async, and then hopefully resolve that. And maybe again synchronously next time. We could see if everyone's approved or if we have outstanding debate.
Okay, cool.
So on the App Runtime Interfaces working group, I had just added the approvers by area as it was discussed in the comments, but it's still basically empty. That means we have a few approvers by copy. The copy team itself probably I need the names, and then that can easily be added. The other areas, I simply let it open, and then we can go from there. But we have no working group lead candidate yet.
I have a lead candidate that I'm going to get to apply later today.
Awesome. Okay, and on the Pichetto one, Jan had dropped some comments on there that I've not had a chance to have a look at because of being away on holiday. So I'll have a nosy at those.
I know we. Oh, go ahead, Jan. Sorry.
And I didn't find the time to actually approach the potential leads from the Pichetto to talk about that. Sorry for that.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to mention that I think we've talked about this one a couple of meetings, and I think you had mentioned maybe at least wanting some reflection of the community principles in their governance docs. Was there a spot in there that you thought might be appropriate to change to refer to those, or to otherwise call back to the CFF community docs?
I haven't looked too closely, and like to be frank, if I start looking, I probably also look how good the working groups and roles documents actually match, and we could actually approach them and like suggest I don't know, somehow better merge into this, if this is going to be a CFF project. I mean, but anyway.
I mean, my main thinking around that one was actually going with, since they've got something that's already there and working, adopting that seems like a slightly easier and lower path of resistance and a lower barrier to entry. That was my thinking on it.
Yeah, I think we definitely should look that there are no clashes, right, in how we think things should be. And then probably everything is fine. Although I still struggle to see where this is heading, right? If they are, like, I understand the approach of saying we want to be as independent as possible. I do get this point, but it's like I'm still struggling a bit of what's the best way forward there. if that much independence is needed and beneficial, then why not go for it, right? Not that I'm particularly picky there or particularly strong opinions, but it feels a little strange, right? Yeah, but anyway, I'll in the end will turn out not to be more bureaucratic than needed, and just comply to that. But it just feels strange, right? If I think about it, we are going to talk about things like budget for CI, right? So they have a benefit of being part of the CFF community, and then yeah. Anyway, it just has a certain smell.
So I'm happy if I see a roadmap for the existing CF deployments towards Paketo, and then I would simply let them work. But yeah, I have still some doubts. But let's see what comes out.
Okay, have we got any more on the working groups? Okay, in which case it seems like an appropriate movement to move on to where are we going with the CF at Kate's SIG call, which we did briefly start before I was away, and I'll hand it over to the rest of the room to fill in on where things have been since.
I don't think that there was much update from our talk meetings that you might have missed, other than I got an update from Bernd, like a ping of like, could you please raise that topic again? And because he's currently hosting that and looking forward to no longer hosting it, so that's why I've put it onto the agenda, so that we should come to something. I think we were arguing in a direction of maybe the whole topic of like how to align the CF value proposition with how this could be beneficial for Kate's, that this is somehow going to end up as a, I don't know, temporary working group or whatever, and then this would be the natural place, right, to not have that SIG call, but instead have a working group with a working group call and all that things attached. On the other hand, this might take some time, right? I mean, I suppose this is going to be a working group where you have to align with working group tech leads of how these working groups are going to align and work together, and like how this is working. And we currently have working groups without tech leads proposed, and Bernd is looking forward to no longer host it. On the other hand, I'm not sure if there's an immediate topic for those calls. I mean, in the past, a couple of calls were canceled because of no proposals. The current poll has no proposals, I think. So maybe our way forward could be we stop it now and we'll see what comes up in that area when it comes up. It hasn't really been used as a forum for exchange for quite a while, I'd say. Just an open exchange between different interested parties. So this could be a way forward. Not sure what you think.
Yeah, I think I think earlier this year we ended up canceling a bunch of calls because there weren't those explicit topics. I do know that there's a fair amount of just ongoing technical work right now. So I guess I would look to some of the folks like Birdrock and Giuseppe and Tim that have been leading a lot of that technical work already in the community, even though it's we haven't formally realized it in a working group, to ask if they'd find it valuable just to have that as a periodic synchronous forum to discuss any of that work with the community, or if we'd want to just close out the series until we have a working group structure that would support it as part of the natural working group meeting cadence.
Having all three that you mentioned present in today's call, we might also go forward and open just another PR and start establishing a working group if those three think that is something valuable and that's the way forward. Like, I mean, I have no idea how you would prefer to organize these efforts, but if you would, we could also start with that kind of working group, right? I mean.
Yeah, I don't have a super solid answer as for whether we should continue the CF for Kate's SIG meetings, which would probably be modified to be more inclusive of just efforts in general. But we probably would want a forum going forward pretty soon to gather feedback about some of the work that we're pushing forward, because we are getting to the point where we're going to start making some decisions about some tooling and stuff that we would really prefer not to have to just like sort of make a decision and drop it and then have people say, why did you do that? So we're kind of doing the initial sort of like least effort to get the tooling that works without making any long-term consequences choices, while we're trying to get something that is actually serviceable for people to explore. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to say, I don't know if we're going to need the in-person meetings in the next couple of weeks, but we will need some kind of forum, whether it's async or synchronous, in the next, I would say, month, to get some of those ideas surfaced and get feedback. Hopefully some of my other friends can speak a bit.
Yeah, like I'd be curious to see how much we could get that done, like asynchronous. Because like some of the CF on Kate SIG calls in the past have been, we just like used it as time to read a doc, and then people just added comments on the doc, and we entered those asynchronously anyway, and it felt like it didn't quite need to be in person for that. I'm not sure how us being a mini working group though would be that different from what that process already is. Like, I think like maybe informally we already are acting as that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been advocating for this working group for a while. I think it's a great idea to have it because, as you said, like we've been working together anyway as some kind of working group for a while, so it only makes sense to have one. But that is kind of a separate question from how do we interface with the rest of the community? How do we gather feedback from them, and how do we show our progress, etc. I don't know if we have anything in the current working group model that is designed for the working group to kind of share the progress and gather feedback, or if I agree that we also need that.
Yeah, I think that's where we are looking to the expectations that we have around the working groups, around having regular public meetings, and then like regular interface with the TOC on at least a quarterly cadence. So I think that's where we're kind of connecting the dots here to say, like, well, we kind of informally have that at least a slot for that forum right now. So if we did end up having a focused working group on for CF on Kates, then seems like a natural evolution of that discussion forum into just the public working group forum in the community.
I think the alternatives that we discussed in the very beginning when this working group discussion started was to have CF for Kates as part of the deployments working group, and so that we have one working group that is a sort of that ensures that all the different kind of deployments have at least the C and the S in common, so that there's certain compatibility and roadmap, and also think about topics like migration and what usually comes up, because otherwise, you might have different things and everybody is locked in the whole in its own type of deployment, and you can just use different letters to describe the different things.
Yeah, the problem is that I think that the project is evolving towards not being like just a deployment method anymore. Like I think something like kubectl was very much like we're basically lifting the same stuff and just deploying it on top of K8s, but now we are essentially rewriting huge chunks, or maybe the whole thing. So like we've noticed that like there's bits that maybe belong to the, I don't know, interfaces group. There's bits that belong to the runtime group, but like, we end up with something like a RENI, which is the runtime equivalent of Diego and Garden being in the runtime group. And then there is the components that talk to a RENI, which belong to another group, while we really like to collaborate more closely and be in the same working group instead. So
yeah, but that actually then I mean the same arguments apply also for the Bosch-based deployments, right? So maybe the whole model that we have brought up is questionable. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I see the Kubernetes projects to be more tightly integrated because it's just a smaller amount of code, and we are reusing a lot more from Kubernetes. I think the Bosch equivalents are much bigger and beefier, and they require just more people, and then that kind of in turn needs the group to be broken down, because otherwise you can't just get so many people to collaborate effectively. I think on K8s at the moment we are maybe 10 people, something like that. If I can't, it's 2 of us in EU plus 3 people from SAP, and then on the West Coast I think there is other maybe 12, but like that kind of order of magnitude
over 20 working
yeah
groups.
I mean at some point the Garden team alone was 7 or 8 people just for Garden, so just it's a like 10x kind of difference.
I still think that there should be some kind of interfacing with all kinds of working groups, one of them being the one that does release engineering, because there might be rules set up for how does the community release things, or like how cuts are run, or if you are allowed to just go a subset of that. So I think there's quite a lot of interfacing. So I think this is really going to be kind of a special working group with ties to others, right? I mean, if we look at the setup, Irene is part of the platform working group, Kapi is part of the interfaces working group, and you will have to somehow deploy things to Kubernetes. So that's already like overlap with 3 different working groups. And I think we should just try, if something like a transient working group or whatever somehow works out, because this has a nature of that. And I agree that I wouldn't just spread the like permissions, approval roles or whatever for 10 people across different working groups just because they align topic wise there. So I guess we'll have to collect experience with that, and maybe we should take that as one of the results of that, to actually look at how is that working out. Does this kind of working group work, or does that clash with our model, or like and gather some insights there as well for the future. There might be other similar things in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. Makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me as well, because like as you said, like we have to touch base with all those groups. Like we're going to be interacting with the interfaces group, like CLI team and the API team a lot, but also as Birdrock was pointing out, like on the deployment side, there's going to be like some tooling choices and stuff we're going to have to raise. So I don't know, that makes sense to me too.
Yeah, I think especially the thought of taking it as sort of a transient exploratory thing to get some information and feedback about how the process works and how you work with cross-cutting efforts that may be pretty small. Makes a lot of sense. So I'm in favor of trying it if people are game to back up a little bit.
I guess
Yeah.
maybe, if we're kind of converging on the idea of a short to medium lived, at least, working group for CF on Kates, would the next step then be to start drafting a charter for that working group to lay out its goals and scope and responsibilities and who'd be involved?
Yep, that sounds like the right move to me.
Cool. Giuseppe, I know you'd mentioned being interested in this idea. Would you be interested in taking a crack at that draft? I think also we could, get other people to help you with that and to support. But
Yeah, I mean, I've never written one before, but definitely happy to give it a try and then see how it goes.
Great. Yeah, I guess, at this point we've got a few examples already, at least as outstanding PRs on the community repo. So there's that at least to draw some initial structure from.
Great. Always good to have some inspiration.
Yeah.
So for the CF zig call, do we discontinue it from now on, or would we just kind of hand it over to, like, I don't know, Tim, Andrew, and Giuseppe to think if they want to take over the host role of that, and then handle it however it fits, right? I mean, canceling if there's no topic, or bringing up the topic that you would just, like, even if you just want to kick off a look at what we've written here, we need your feedback. That could be the right thing. Like I meant, otherwise you need to find another communication channel for getting people to look at that, right? So maybe that's the best solution for in between the creation of that working group and now. But
yeah, like that makes sense to me, that the call persists until the working group can take over it and schedule its own version of the same call.
Yeah, I forget who actually owns the Zoom invite for that. Rob, do you know if that should be a CFF one, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. I'm pretty sure it is just based on the presence on the community calendar. Okay, so maybe Birdrock and Tim and Giuseppe, you could just figure out how to take over the coordination responsibilities for it. If Bernd is, if the most urgent thing there is to relieve Bernd of those responsibilities, then I think that sounds fair.
I will. I'll reach out to Bernd and see if I can get some information, or I'll reach out to as many people as it takes.
Awesome.
Cool. So that seems like kind of a natural segueing into any other business.
Just a couple of things. So the monthly cab call is scheduled for tomorrow. I'm going to have to cancel for this month because I didn't have the time to actually coordinate a speaker or a demo for that. So just letting folks know. And we had the first of the TOC members interviews that happened last week, and Jan was kind enough to spend an hour talking through various issues. This week we have the Eric edition of the same.
Oh, right.
So
I better do my homework.
yeah, just a reminder for folks, and I'll be sharing information on various channels as well. So yeah, just two things from me.
And how much is going to be this Eric edition, how much is it going to be different from Jan's one?
I don't know. I should maybe watch the recording of Jan's, so then I can say the same thing. So it'd be great. I'll just crib off of his sheet.
It's based on the same slides, isn't it? It's based on the same slides.
And there's no slides.
It's the
It's
same
a conversation between Ram and us, basically.
Yeah, where we're going, we don't need slides.
All right.
Yeah, Ram, I think you had a pretty good slate of potential questions and topics to discuss, right? That you had posted in Slack a while ago.
Yeah, I'll send it your way.
Oh, great.
Just for some rudimentary preparation of sorts, but yeah, don't have to stick to it, to be honest. So.
Cool.
All right.
Does anyone have anything else?
Well,
Maybe a little. Yeah, go on.
I just wanted to mention that I'm applying to take a role into the infrastructure working group, from which sounds reasonable for my involvement in the past. I applied for technical lead, but we just had a discussion with Ruben. I could start with approver, which would be perfectly fine in my current core contributor role. And I have a vision about Bosch, if you guys want to hear that. I would not expose it overall here, but yeah, I would start renaming Bosch, definitely, which could be a surprising change in this community. But yeah, if you guys want to hear about that, I would be happy to put on some slides and just have an informal discussion about that. But Bosch is unique in the world, and well, we should do something about that.
Ben, you're probably going to have opinions about the scope and vision of the infrastructure working group where Bosch is. I recommend taking a look at it and giving us feedback on it, on how you'd want to change it to accommodate those ideas. In theory, as you can see, there's a branch in the community where we're working on it. I'll paste it in, but we also haven't submitted it for approval yet anyway and review by the community. So you should certainly take part in that once it gets submitted for that. But if you want to do it even earlier, I'll send you the link to the branch.
Yeah, definitely. I take a look.
This brought up an interesting question for me when you applied about what do we expect out of leads in terms of like vendor sponsoring and like time commitment and such. I think we haven't really formalized it. I think we talked about it briefly in this call at one point, which is we need like sort of a sponsoring foundation member approval for to spend essentially company time on the leadership role, right? And we expected it to be somewhere between quarter time and half time of a job. It's one of the things that's kind of nice about these working group leads from a vendor perspective is you can consolidate that time responsibility more in a smaller number of individuals who spend more time than like loosely spread across so many different people. So I think that's been my impression of the role. And we could codify that impression if we need to. Somewhat unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of people who's doing what Ben is doing and from various parts of the community applying to be leads. So I hesitate to codify it because I don't think we actually have this problem. I wish we had this problem.
And yeah, we need to get to know each other. I mean, starting with approver is perfectly fine for the moment, for the time being.
The other thing that's kind of related to leads and lead selection and so on is that there's two different lead roles potentially possible in each working group. And so far, we haven't really differentiated. We're finding like maybe one candidate who can fulfill both. If anybody has any interesting like roadmap lead ideas for various working groups, I think most of the people who are applying, all the people who are interested in being leads are really technical engineers who could do some roadmap work. But there's a missed opportunity, maybe. Or maybe the roadmap is in these areas are really easy to understand and simple, right? The product's quite mature. So maybe we don't need roadmap leads in various areas. If they're where I think a roadmap lead would maybe be most interesting would be like the most volatile parts of the group, like Paketo and any Kubernetes work that's going on, right?
Right.
Besides the potentially different lead roles, I think we are also not necessarily limited to exactly one tech lead per working group.
Oh, I meant to bring that up. I meant to ask at this group whether people felt that way or not.
No, don't think so.
If I look at the interfaces working group, it's, I would say, out of discussions that you have just one lead. You will effectively, it's a collection of loosely coupled topics that have a certain aspect of interface, but yeah, I would be surprised if there's a big overlap between the different parts. So it goes from notification service to KPI and CLI. That's something that is closely coupled and makes sense, but the other ones could be own working groups as well.
But another model for that would be there's one lead who kind of has an idea about where all these things are going to go and has approvers in each of the other areas that like really know the code bases. So
that's for sure. You need that.
Yeah, I don't know which way to go. I'm just saying it simplifies things. Like if you have 4 leads in each working group that are only responsible for different sections of it, it starts to look like the projects that we had before. Is the risk that I see.
Yeah.
To me, like a lead would be like the person that's responsible for connecting people, right? So you have the approved, like, I don't know, just making sure that the communication happens, right? Discussing topics with the right people. I think that would be the main responsibility of the lead.
Right. Not to mention a single voice to decide when something it gets sort of end of lifed in a group because there's just not enough attention in it, it gets put in the attic, or a new thing can come in or not come in. If you have all these leads in different areas, right, like, and something's coming in, that decision becomes more difficult. So I see advantages to there being only one for what it's worth. I don't like the syngality of the vendor situation that could arise if there's one lead and it's all VMware all over the place. So like, there's some interesting world where there's like 2 leads per group and they could both be technical if those are the people that we have that are interested. And rather than maybe dividing up all the responsibility, they try to share the role together to prevent the siloed project situation would be my proposal.
As I see the infrastructure working group, there are areas that it's not just about organizing making people work together. It's also about having parts of the capital, the code capital, being effectively used. I'm especially thinking of these Bosch packages, which was in the first place a very good idea to share common bits of packages to be used over all Bosch releases. And only a few of them are actually maintained. It would not be that costly to set up some CI that updates but bumps dependencies automatically and publishes packages. Could provide a much better image of on the external side that people can see the Bosch technology is alive. with actual latest versions available. And this goes for packages, BOSH releases, and also for stem cells. I mean, for someone new in BOSH, it's strange not to have latest Ubuntu versions as stem cells. And yeah, those are sometimes not so ideas, but yeah, improve the way people perceive BOSH. Anyway, just like this.
I'm wondering if, I feel like we don't need to clarify exactly how many lead candidates we're going to allow until the situation comes up at the TOC level, but we might have to make a decision upcoming on that in one working group or another, and in what capacity we allow multiple leads. But let's collect candidates, good candidates, leads.
Yeah, I mean, I also think in general, it makes sense, especially for some of these larger groups, to have a small number of leads leading the group, just to spread the load more sustainably, and to allow that multiplicity of participation across member works. So again, if we end up in the happy situation where a lot of people want to take on that responsibility, then I think we can accommodate it structurally, and there's notes in the governance docs already that I think maybe somewhat informally, but they recommend that kind of structure anyway, or at least allow for it to be accommodated.
Okay, anyone have anything further to add?
Maybe for moving on to the next topic, you're asking for areas of business. At some point, I feel like there's got to be some amount of technical standardization that we do in adoption of the new working group model. For example, we need to create standards about how the repositories are organized such that commits can be made and like flip over to PR only models and so on across the board. I'm feeling like some amount of contribution guidelines should be decided at this level. It does not make sense to say every working group decide how you'd like to accept PRs, contributions, and so on. So I think I'm starting to see that we're making progress on working groups and be like, well, what would maybe be the next most important thing? It would be creating a standard contribution guide for this new model, such that each working group lead feels supported and doesn't have to do all of that independently, right? And potentially likely differently. I'm open to other things being the next most important thing that the TOC has to. It's just one of the things that I think is high in the priority list and is hard for working groups to be super effective without that support. If people agree that that's good news, then the question becomes who's going to work on it? Eric volunteered. I just saw the thumbs up there. You saw it. You all saw it.
I've got a live stream to prepare for, so.
Yeah, for example, I took the Cloud Foundry community repo and I made it so like I made like Ruben a writer so that he could make a branch and like so on. And we need to figure out, we need to build new sets of teams, presumably in GitHub. There's like a lot of like physical reorganization in the GitHub level and setting standardization that needs to happen. A lot of fun there. We don't have Chris to support us at the foundation level to do a bunch of those logistical things. Ram, how much support can we expect from you all if we create guidelines for how we need all the repositories to be like for example, set? Is this things that the CFF can help us with, or is that not really till Chris comes back?
So just FYI, Chris is back next week on Monday. Yeah, as much help as you folks need, and just give us the orders, I guess. So we're here to tag team and just help as much as we can.
I guess as part of that, as well, the thing that next thing that kind of feeds into it is around the CI/CD role and how that fits in, because that should really dovetail with the contribution guidelines.
I'm not sure that's quite true, Lee, but I think in a perfect world that would be true. I think the reality is that each code base or team area is going to have like different CI systems and different things you maybe would like a potential PR to go through in order to be accepted. Unfortunately, right? Like we can't set a standard because it's not something we can execute at the TOC level. We can set a standard for how like the Git repositories are organized and then ask for the Foundation's help to like stamp the settings out across all the repos, right? But we can't be like everyone magically convert to GitHub Actions that respond to PRs tomorrow.
Yeah, I was thinking more of a strategic approach than an implementation approach.
Sure, totally. And I think, right, having some guidelines there for how we'd like to consume the CI budget and so on, and like shared concourses and things like that would enable these new working groups that are created to like do some initial work to move to that if they wanted to. They could take advantage of their initial momentum, inertia, whatever, in order to try to move to the CI story that we'd like them to move to, but not if we don't provide a CI story that we'd like them to move to.
Yep.
So, okay, so two proposed standards, future-facing standards at the TOC level. One is how contributions are made and accepted to repos in Cloud Foundry, and two is how working groups can leverage Foundation-provided CI resources effectively, also known as like standardizing CI ideally over time. I'm not signing up for either of those at this exact second because I've already failed a little bit at the working group initialization. I need to get my stuff together there. But we could also bring it up next week and see. We may not be quite ready to. I'm just trying to brainstorm like what is our TOC roadmap.
Yeah.
Other topics, other roadmap items people want to put on there, park in our minds so that we can really have a good decision about which one we focus on next.
Yeah, I think you've already teed up the next two fairly chunky ones, David.
I mean, I came up with 2 ideas. What if there's like 12 other things and 2 of those are even more urgent or better to do with first, right? I'm saying without looking at the total set of things we could do first or next, we might miss so good on.
Yeah, David, one thing that's either, it could be even part of the technical contribution guidance, or it could be kind of adjacent to it, is what we want kind of the setting expectations of proposal document format and lifecycle and timelines for commentary before working groups feel like they have enough input to proceed. So that I mean, depending on the level of detail of guidance we give, that could be part of that as the pipeline into doing actual work, or it could be adjacent. And that could include things like what, would there be any kind of organizational structure to support those? Like, would we have, a shared Google Drive or something for proposal documents where once they're ready for official consideration, people put them in there. So there's a central location for those to be stored instead of what I think happens today, we end up putting them in our own organizations, Google accounts.
Yep.
Would there also be some guidance around what the expectation is around like meetings or something for the working groups? Like, do they have like a regular meeting? What's going to be discussed there? Like, I mean, there's some agenda, some like expectations around transparency. That would be nice.
That's not in the working group definition. I believe there's some amount of stuff that is in the working group definition, right? About like, you have to report to the TOC regularly. But I don't think there's anything that requires a working group standing meeting, which I don't know if that's actually something you want to mandate, right?
I don't know, there might be something in the current docs. I'd have to check.
There might be something, and I think the most important point there is, if there is a regular meeting, it should be the public one. If there is no meeting required, I don't think that we should enforce, right? Having a group of people sitting together and there's actually nothing to talk about because you've already discussed everything in PR comments or like whatever other asynchronous medium you might have chosen. But then if you don't have that, you still probably need to define somehow like somebody who wants to approach the working group, then what is the process? Because it is a natural thing of like coming to that working group meeting, say, hi, I'm whoever and why ever I'm interested in this working group. And if you don't have that, you somehow need to describe that part as well. I'm not sure if we should mandate a standing meeting if the working group members all agree that this doesn't make sense. But yeah, it's on the edge a bit because it's missing this natural way of how to approach the working group. I think that is actually nice.
Yeah.
Although it's going to be hard with the time zone overlap that pretty much doesn't exist. If we say we are like inclusive, then there is no match, right, for everyone.
So actually, I can only second this problem to approach a working group. I don't talk so much now about working groups like we define here in the TOC, but concrete projects, for instance, the CAPI team. And what helped us a lot was at the end of the day, something like the open office hours, where one member of the team is available and we can just drop in and talk, and then everything else that once a month or something like that, that was the easy barrier entry, which made it much easier. That's not formal, that's yeah, but you have to know when they are, they should be in the community calendar, etc., but that's not. For instance, what we had before was a CAP meeting. Would I come up with some topics to discuss CAPI related on the CAP meeting? Usually not if I look at the agenda. That's a too high ceremony already, and that's, yeah. And this bandwidth of different channels. So
I can only second that. Yeah, like I mean, my past approach was, hey DK, whom do I approach for that? Like asking Dimitri, who was PM of the team where I dojoed, and the other was trying to use the interrupt bot for different channels, and I already got slapped for why do you do that on the weekend? It's like, yeah, because when I do it during my time, it always says there is no interrupt currently. That's why I did it, and I also got feedback like, yeah, you're sure you can approach me, but I used. I tried Slack handles for Teams and I tried interrupt bot, and I got slapped for it. For you shouldn't use that. Where I said, yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't have notifications on the weekend. But yeah, there needs to be a possible entry, and maybe actually for having something that should work around the world, we should actually establish a asynchronous channel that is easy to access, which would be, I don't know, a working group handle, and it's up to the working group who is going to be the one getting messages. They can do it however they want, and there is no there is no strings attached in terms of, and I request an immediate response. It's just like, for me, it's fine if I send this outside of your working hours, if you respond during yours, right? Because that's why I chose an asynchronous channel in the first place. So, but defining rules for that, for asynchronously approaching a working group, sounds like something we should define. On the other hand, I agree that having a meeting where you can just pop in is also something that might be an approach some people might want to might prefer over an asynchronous written channel. So maybe we should offer both.
The meta version of this is getting a little bit back to what Eric said about like each working group should document how you can ask a question and how you can make a proposal. And we could even provide defaults for anybody who's lazy and wants to copy them. And the defaults could be there's a standing meeting and a Slack channel and so on, right? So yeah, I don't know, like that would let a lighter weight working group that had a lot less activity define a new process if they wanted to, right? Where they don't have to have a standing meeting anymore, for example.
Well, and making sure we keep up with the pace of community contributions and PR reviews is also important. In the past, community contributions have been a real pain for contributors. And also, I do think it has been a nail in the feet for the major vendors around, because they couldn't really say, well, they were saying, oh yeah, you can submit PRs. Yeah, can you get them merged? That's another matter. So if we have the opportunity to improve that now, it's a good time to do it.
Yeah, and that's covered in the working group roles, right? That's part of why we're tagging approvers and leads with the responsibility to do like reasonably timely feedback on PRs and issues. Mm-hmm. And it's part of why the role takes so much time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do we have a decision that working groups need to document like those? Are you all okay with the strategy of working groups need to document those two things in their charters about how you get a hold of us for a question, and the second thing, which I already forgot, which is how you make a proposal?
It sounds reasonable. It's a bit the question, but that's in the details. Google Docs versus a project with PRs. So there was a CFAR project where you could bring in proposals for new features. That's what we used for the space supporter role. There were somewhere at a certain point in time additional Google Docs for Excel tables or something like that needed. That makes all sense. But starting with this model of in a GitHub project with PRs has worked out quite well, actually. So I found it helpful.
I think this medium of choice depends a little bit on what you expect happening, right? If you have a proposal where you expect lots of commentary and stuff like that, then Google Docs might be easier to have fast feedback on that and like that might be, but in the end, for having something like this is now formally decided, I guess PRs are better because Google Docs, wherever you look, tend to always keep their comments open, right? So you never know, is that now decided? Is that fixed? Is anybody still working on that? It's like, I've seen that in the Istio community and in other places. So a PR that is merged at some point in time is merged in exactly that version. If people still had comments, then they at least agreed to that is fine to merge it that way and talk later, or they were overruled or whatever. You have that defined state where with lots of comments in docs, you don't. So I think it's a bit of like it's a trade-off, and might also depend on like the state of a proposal or what you expect from that.
What we could do as a TOC to facilitate that would be create a drive, like Eric is suggesting, a home for Google Documents, and create a default set of text that can be brought into working groups that kind of say, like, here's some ideas for how you can collect these types of proposals and questions. Feel free to modify to fit your particular thing. I'm about to disappear on you because my daughter says, all done.
She's basically right.
Yeah, she said bye, see ya, by the way, earlier.
Can we get her for the SIG meeting to close it out? Because that might be helpful.
Yeah, she says about 2 minutes in there, she'll be like, bye, see ya.
All right.
Well, these all sound like good topics to keep discussing and moving forward in subsequent weeks.
Cool. And that pretty much takes us to time.
I've just a little, very little interesting from another TOC from the CNCF. There's a link, you can find it in the Build Packs channel on the Cloud Foundry Slack. There was a security assessment for cloud native build packs. It's quite worth watching. It's like at least partly like a part of the TOC is going to propose to CNCF projects to drop Docker files in favor of build packs. It's definitely worth watching.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool.
Bye, see ya.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.